Hi, and welcome to our sermon. This is now the fourth Sunday of Easter. So that means that we are 4 weeks away from Easter Sunday. And we're still talking about the resurrection in many ways, and that'll be part of some of the readings. The gospel passage for this week, though, is John chapter 10. I hope you were able to hear Ruth read the passage to you. So let's dive in. Now this week, as you can tell, we are back to a metaphor that we have seen before, and I think within the last couple of months we've already talked about this metaphor somewhat. I'll try and bring out some other aspects of it, but the metaphor I'm talking about is that of the shepherd and the sheep. As a pastor, this is an important one because essentially a pastor is a shepherd. But here we're talking about Jesus as the shepherd and his sheep. And the relationship here is spoken about, and Jesus calls himself the good shepherd. But let's have a look here at our passage and see what we can get out of it, and see what Jesus is saying to us. Now the reason I think Jesus has chosen this metaphor here in John is because he's trying to tell us how he feels about us. I think the relationship between the shepherd and the sheep is one that, yes, it tells us about us, the usual sheep lesson, but it also tells us how he feels about us and how much he loves us. So let's have a look at that one. The first one is to tell us that the shepherd knows the sheep. He knows the sheep. Now, the last time we've spoken about this, I mentioned this man, and I'll mention him again. His name is Douglas Macmillan, and he's one of many, actually, actual shepherds who had actual sheep who became a pastor. And there's a story of Douglas sitting on a train with a friend of his who was still a shepherd, and they were talking about, the shepherd's his dealings and the fact that he had sold some of his sheep. And on this train, as they were pulling out of the station, they passed one of the fields of the farmers to whom some of this man's sheep were sold. And he looked out into the field, field of, maybe sort of 100, 200 sheep. And the shepherd, looking out of the window, said, "Hey, look, there are 4 of mine." Now, you and I may think, whatever, there's no way the guy can recognize 4 of his sheep in a field of sheep. But the truth is, to Douglas, this wasn't a surprise. Because a shepherd, when looking after his sheep out in the field, will often, according to this man, will stand sort of on a ridge or somewhere where he can see all the sheep. And he'll actually try and make eye contact with the sheep. He wants to stay in touch. He wants to let them know that he's there, but also he's looking at each and every one of them. He's observing them, and also so that he can see the very edges of the field. So if a wolf or a thief, as we hear in the passage, comes, he's there to rush, protect, throw a rock, whatever it needs to be, to keep the sheep safe. So here straight away, we see when Jesus says he knows us, when he says that he knows his sheep and they know his voice, he means it. He's there. They have that real connection. He really knows the sheep. But another thing we have to remember that Douglas will say very clearly about sheep is they aren't very smart. They are, he would say, the most dependent animal that man cares for. The most dependent animal. One example is this. If you were to take an animal, any other animal, and you were to take them out into the wild and let them go, right? There are normally 2 reactions that animals have. Either the first one, they burst out of the leash or the cage or whatever it is when you release them, and out they go and they run and they go wild. If I take Hodge out to a field where he can just be let loose, I let him off the leash, and he runs like a wild dog, goes crazy. He's super happy. He comes back, he says thank you, and then off he goes out into the wild like a crazy thing. The other reaction that animals can have is you let them off and straight away they climb up on you and they don't want to go anywhere. Or they go straight back to the car, or they go straight back home. Because they sort of the E.T. reaction, you know, E.T. go home, if you know the film. So they either go home or they run out. Sheep, however, do not have either of these reactions. Sheep just start wandering, and they will start following each other aimlessly because they don't know where they're going. And then if they think that they're lost or they feel insecure, they panic, which may often result in their death. So that's sheep, entirely, totally dependent upon the shepherd. And I think that that's something he's talking to us about. He's telling us how dependent we are on him and how we need him. And I'm going to try and show it in this example. I hope that it helps. There's a line that people often use. I've heard it said many, many times, and I've probably said it myself sometimes. This is the line. It is this: it shouldn't matter what other people think. It shouldn't matter. You do things for yourself, man. Doesn't matter what other people say. Doesn't matter what other... And the truth is, while I understand what we're trying to say behind that line, which is, you know, hey, don't let jerks get the best of you. Don't let people say bad things and get hurt by it. The idea that it shouldn't matter what anyone else thinks. You know, I'll give you an example. It's an extreme example, I know, but I'm going to give you one. Imagine there's a poet. A man who has been writing poetry for 10 years. For 10 years he's written his poetry, and for 10 years he's shown his poetry to others. And every single person, let's say let's say 1,000 people have seen his poetry in those 10 years. And everyone's told him, your poetry's terrible, it's awful. And that man would say after 10 years, and all of those comments would say, but you know what? I don't care what other people think. I know my poetry is amazing, and so I'm just going to keep writing it. Now, you could say, wow, he's got some real self-esteem. But you also could say, he's off his rocker, right? He's crazy, he's mad. There's no way you can continue to think that your poetry is amazing when everyone has told you that it isn't. There's just a break with reality at that point. Now, I'm all for poets, artists, doing art for themselves, doing things for ourselves because we like it, because we enjoy it. But if I'm continually getting commentary, this isn't good, this isn't right, I do need to listen. I do need to take in what other people are saying. And as a human being, as a person, and in reality, that poet wouldn't keep going for those 10 years because as people, we need affirmation, appreciation from the outside. We can't, if we're going to say it this way, we can't bless ourselves. We can't give ourselves a name in society. We can't do those things for ourselves. We need to receive it from outside. We are dependent creatures. We can't live in isolation and disconnected. We need others, we need community, we need family, and we need God. And what's amazing in this passage is that Jesus isn't only saying that we are dependent like sheep, but that he knows us. And then in all the things that we do, all of the silly decisions that we make, all of the crazy paths we walk down, all of the ways that we panic when we don't know what to do, he knows us and he sees us and he cares. The second point that I want to make is that the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, sorry. The shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. There was a brother that once came to me, and he was going through a tough spot in his life, and when he was sort of in this confession, he told me not only what was going on, but also he said, you know what, if If my wife knew all the thoughts that were going on in my head, she'd leave me. She'd leave me immediately. And I was thinking about that and thinking about myself. And I think many pastors would say this, but I can say this. You know, if you guys knew everything that went on in my head, I don't think you'd hear another sermon. I don't think you'd ever want to listen to another YouTube video or come to another Zoom service. And the way that I know that you know that that's true is because that's true of you as well. Because it's true of all of us. All of us deep inside know how broken and how lost and how sheepish, how sheep-like we are. Dependent, broken, messed up deeply inside. And we need him. And what Jesus says in this passage is that I know you. I know who you are. And yet, I lay down my life for you. In verses 11 to 13, it says here, and it's an interesting point. In verse 11 to 13, it says that if the hirelings, if the hired workers are looking after the sheep and the wolf comes, the hired worker runs. But the shepherd doesn't run. And he says, and I, the good shepherd, lay down my life. Another thing to know about sheep is that not only were they the most dependent creatures, are the most dependent creatures, but back then, they were also the most valuable. I mean, why are these robbers and thieves coming to steal the sheep? It's because sheep are incredibly valuable in the ancient world. They produce wool, their skin is usable, the meat is usable, the milk, everything about the sheep is valuable. And so that's why they had to be protected. A man's worth, like financial worth, material worth in the world was evaluated by his sheep. That's how you knew. But he says the hirelings, if you're only in it for the money, they're not going to protect the sheep. They're going to run. The wolf comes and they go. But the shepherd's going to stand there for the sheep. But here in this passage, Jesus takes the love and he takes it to the next level. Okay, I love Hodge. I love my dog, right? And when we took Hodge on, I made it very clear to the family, very clear to myself, you know, we're taking on a life here, right? We don't just misuse a life. We care for him, we love him, we look after him until the day he dies. That's what it means. And so that's how we've taken him. But I'll be honest. Hodge jumps into the sea, sort of there by Jaffa Port, and he gets himself in trouble and the sea starts, you know, smacking him against the rocks. I'll be honest, my children may disagree, but I'll be honest, I'm not jumping in to save him. I'm not, and I don't think Adele would either. But what Jesus says here is he takes the metaphor of the shepherd and the sheep and he takes it to the next level. Because when he says that he will lay down his life for the sheep, he uses a Greek word. He uses the word huper. And huper means not just for the sheep, but he will put himself in the place of the sheep. He's saying, I'm the shepherd, that when the wolf comes, I will be a lamb, and the wolf will put his teeth, sink his teeth into my body. When the robber comes, he will put his hands around my neck and drag me off. What Jesus is saying here is that he knows you, all of the crazy, dumb decisions, all of that stuff, he knows you and loves you and will not only come with the rock to protect you, but he takes your place and suffers the consequences of all of that stuff for you and is dragged off in your stead. That's what he is saying when he says that he will lay down his life. And I think it is sort of the statement of the way that God values us. This is the Lord that He owns the universe. He owns the galaxies, the stars. He owns every planet that goes around every star in every galaxy of the universe. But he looks at us and says, but I will become a sheep for you. There is a series of Sherlock Holmes novels, and if you've never read them, I recommend them. But there's one called The Musgrave Mystery. And in The Musgrave Mystery, Sherlock is approached by a man called Musgrave who comes and says, you've got to come to my place. I have found a body in the lake and a treasure in the lake. And this murdered man is found in the lake holding a bundle. And in this bundle, Musgrave is bewildered as to why this man was murdered for this bundle. There's sort of broken bits of metal, there's a sort of a circle of bent metal, and then there are some coins. And he notices that the coins, these few coins, come from the days of Charles I. And he's like, interesting, but why? I mean, just for a couple of coins and these bits of metal, why would he do it? And Sherlock, in this thing, he sort of comes, he investigates, he observes the treasure, looks at the man, looks at the thing, begins to ponder, begins to think. And then it's Sherlock who eventually grabs one bit of the metal, looks at it, observes it, and starts to sort of rub it. And as he rubs it, he can see that there are a couple of gems attached here, but they don't look worth very much. But he's going to have a look because he's an investigator, and he rubs off and rubs the gem. And as he sees the gem and he sees the metal, he realizes what he's holding. He says the reason that this man was murdered is because what he was holding in his hand is the lost crown of the kings of England. And all of a sudden, they all realize what they're holding in their hands. When Jesus looks at you and knows you and sees you, he doesn't just see all of the mistakes you've made. He doesn't just see the panicky, lost, dependent sheep not knowing what to do and where to go. He sees your value. He sees who you are, and not the skin and the wool and the meat, but he sees you for all that he has created you to be. And so when he says, I will come and take your place, this is what he's trying to say. I see you as the most valuable thing in creation. I own the universe. I have all of this. But I still look to you and see you as so valuable that I would come and die for you. I have the authority to lay it down. I have the authority to take it up again. But I'm doing it because I'm trying to tell you something. And I believe you know my voice. You will hear my voice and you will come after me. That's what he's trying to get through in this passage. So if you're looking into the mirror and you're saying to yourself, why would he die for me? What value do I hold? Don't trust in your own evaluation of yourself. Don't let the sheep look in the mirror and think that the sheep can evaluate itself. Hear God speak to you and tell you how valuable you truly are. And trust in that. And finally, after talking about how he knows, the shepherd knows the sheep, and how the shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, the shepherd also leads the sheep. In our passage, if you read through John chapter 10, you'll see that he leads the sheep out and brings them back in. And it's a little strange because in the Western world, sheep are not actually led out. Sheep are driven. I used to watch a program, and if any of you are from the United Kingdom, you may remember this, but back in a long time ago, there was a program on BBC television called The Shepherd and His Dog. Or maybe it was a farmer and his dog. Anyway, there was a program where it was a competition, essentially, of shepherds with their dogs, and they would use the dog to move the sheep around the field, and the goal was to get the sheep in the pen, or to get them into 2 or 3 different places. And the man, by whistling to the dog, would be able to drive the sheep in different ways. And in the West, that's what we do. We drive sheep. But in the east, apparently, sheep are not driven, but they are led. And they hear the voice of the shepherd and they follow. And it's an interesting metaphor to think about, because Jesus is doing the kind of thing, same kind of thing with us. He's saying, I'm leading you. And as we go through life and we're trying to follow God, in many times we come across sort of these big decision moments or regular decision moments, and we sort of want God to give us a map. Tell me what to do. Tell me the ABC and I'll follow it. And that way I'll know what. But Jesus isn't doing that. He's leading us. And so he's, in many ways, it's like, you want to know what to do? Flip a coin. Whatever decision it is that you make, I'll be there. I'll be there to lead you, to guide you. If you make bad decisions, I'll reweave the story so that we can bring you to a place where you will be able to do things and see things that you can't imagine right now. But trust me, I'm there. I'm leading you. And like a shepherd with sheep, whether we climb up to that dangerous part of the cliff and might fall down, or whether we are following him along the path, he'll figure it out. He's there for us. He will guide us and will lead us. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to remember as we look at this passage and think about our lives and think about where God is taking us. It's not, God isn't issuing orders and telling you to do A, B, and C. He's leading and letting you make decisions, mistakes and good decisions along the way. And then finally, I want to talk about how he calls us by name. If you go on what shepherds have said, you can know that a shepherd can approach his flock, which has, maybe 5 or 6 different families, 40, 50, 60 sheep even, and the sheep will recognize his whistle. They'll recognize his sound. It could be clicks, it could be a whistler, or he could be whistling to them. They recognize the sound and they follow the shepherd. But nowhere can I find that it says that sheep actually recognize their name. They don't have a one-on-one naming relationship with sheep. It's everybody recognizes the voice and that's it, they follow. But there's no one-on-one. They don't the shepherd doesn't open the pen and be like, all right, Jeff, Bill, it doesn't work like that. But here in this passage, Jesus says no. He gives each one of us a name. He knows each one of us by name, individually. Now, in the ancient world, a name is more than just a label. It's more than just saying, okay, you're Bill, now I know what to call you, it's Bill. If I need you, I will say Bill. No, a name denotes status in the ancient world. You can see this, by the way, if you go back to Genesis chapter 11, you will hear people, they built the Tower of Babel, and God judges them not because they built a tower. He judges them because it says they tried to make a name for themselves. They tried to make a name for themselves. So name denotes status. Name also in scripture denotes mission, what I want you to do. In the New Testament, we have Simon, a disciple of Jesus, who is then named Peter because he is to be this rock. He is to be a rock for the church. Abram is also then named Abraham so that he will be a father of many nations. Names are given because they give status and because they denote a mission. Now, this is a really important thing for us to learn, because many times we look for our names in a relationship. We look for our names in work. We look for a name in our families, or the way that we are recognized in our community or our church. But Jesus is saying no. He is the one that gives us our name. He is the one that bestows on us the status and the mission. In him we find the value. And if we try to look for our name or make a name for ourselves, in anything else, it won't be able to, especially in like marriage relationships, family relationships, it won't be able to bear the weight of the level of blessing, self-affirmation, affirmation. It won't be able to carry the weight of all that we need, of all of this heart desires, because it cannot carry that level of dependency. So let me give you an example. Adele cannot carry all that I need. She cannot give me everything that I need, all of the affirmation, the love, the security. She can't give that all to me. It's too much. She's a dependent sheep the way I am a dependent sheep. Work, all of the stuff, it can't give it all to me. I need so much. There's only one that can give the sheep all that they need, and that's the shepherd. And so when he comes and he says, I name you, it's because he sees our sheepness. He sees how dependent we are, how much love we need, how much care we need. He knows us. And then he loves us so much. He sees our value. He sees what he's created us to be. And he says, let me lead you. Let me name you. Let me tell you what you're worth and who you are and what you're here to do. And that way, we'll walk together. God bless you guys.